All right, Frederic. Please introduce yourself for the interview for everyone watching.
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Frederic Chen. I am 20 years old. I'm a senior at NYU. I live in New York City and I am a content creator.
All right, Frederic, thank you so much for introducing yourself. Please get into it with us. Like, what do you do as a content creator? What is the content that you push out, etc.?
Yeah, so I started on YouTube like 6 years ago now. I started in my freshman year of high school and it was always like for fun. It was a hobby of mine. I did photography prior to it. So I was like, I know how to work a camera to an extent. It started off with like superwoman type of videos, like 10 things I wish I had or like favorite superpowers I want. And eventually grew into like this sort of channel where it's like I documented my life because I just moved to New Jersey from South Carolina in my sophomore year. So I didn't really have friends. So I would always go online and just like either act like I had friends online or just do stuff that I would normally do in my bedroom and record it, like painting or drawing. It turned into a community eventually of like a lot of LGBT people and
Yeah.
Asian Americans, I realized. So I just thought, hey, like, why not like maybe I can be a role model. I don't know, like 16-year-old me was like, I don't know how to do that, but I just kept doing the same thing. Now that I've transitioned to college, it sort of turned into like a vlog style, talking about what college life has been, tips and tricks on like school and stuff. But overall, it's still like what I want to do. I call it a selfish channel because it's like I will post what I want.
No, yes, that's like amazing. You talked about moving from Carolina to New York. I feel like that's such a big cultural difference.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, like tell us.
So
Oh, sorry.
I
Go,
no,
Frederic.
you're good. I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. So for anyone who doesn't, I'm assuming like most people are from the West Coast. I've yet to visit, so hopefully I can one day after
Yeah.
COVID. But I grew up in like very rural downtown Charleston area. When they talk about the Civil War, that's literally the hot spot of where I grew up in.
Yes.
Not a lot of Asian people. Like honestly, I was one of five people I knew in middle school and high school and I had to move to New Jersey, Morristown, New Jersey, from freshman to sophomore year because my dad changed his job. But because of that, I like basically lost all my friends. Like they were like online instead, and I moved in the summer. So it was like I had a whole summer to myself. And that's when I started my channel. And even then, I call Morristown like the same, like it is South Carolina, except cold because like obviously it's the north, but like it was still a small town, even smaller than the one I grew up in. We have one street that's like downtown,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's just like known for having a lot of rich people who like know each other since birth because you
Hmm.
in order to go to the schools you have to be within the town district and
Within the
it's
town,
yeah,
yes.
very like closed and like a bubble almost.
Hmm. All right. With those changes, with your like moving, tell us about how like your API identity and experiences that you experience, like moving, influence the work that you do, like the content you push out. I feel like with the work that you do, you're like a voice for the LGBTQ community and the AAPI community at the same time.
Well, thank you. I try to like see myself as just because I'm only 20. It's like I'm just like every other LGBT Asian American living their life. I just happened to gain a platform for it, but I didn't really go into my identity as like I didn't really like say, oh, I'm Asian American and feel comfortable with that
Hmm.
until I'm I would say like junior, senior year because I just started meeting more Asian people in general and online like I found it was more accepting to watch people like Eugene Lee Yang, Michelle Phan,
Yes.
like comedians like oh, who else am I thinking of? Well, nowadays like Mina Lee, who's an amazing content creator in New York City,
Yeah.
Ali Wong. Like as I saw more representation show up besides like Mulan, it made me feel more comfortable to be in my own skin because I don't know for other Asian Americans, like I'm sure I know there is a larger population in California. For me, because I wasn't surrounded by other Asian people besides my parents and my two close friends, I didn't really like speak the language outside of school. I didn't even go to Chinese school for it. Rumor is like I went and I cried within the first 2 weeks, so they kicked me out. That's what my mom
Oh,
says. I don't believe it because I don't remember that, but that's the reason why I can only write or I can say it, but I can't like write or understand it like by reading.
no, that's same for me. Rumor has it I went to vid school. Same thing. I, for some mysterious reason, didn't continue it, never heard about my parents. And I feel like on the note of that, like due to like the increase we see with the COVID going on, with the increase in anti-Asian hate and discrimination, do you think that affected the work that you do, the changes and strategies and how you approach certain topics now?
It made me more like aware of the fact that it's still a pressing issue. I thought like at least when I moved to New York City, because like NYU has such a dominant Asian population here. I
Yes,
was like so excited to see that so many people were from like China and international. I didn't think it was a problem, but now that like once I started seeing more of those crimes happening and reading about it all the time, it was sort of like
yes.
doom scrolling, and I got insecure because I remember like um after the Pulse shooting in Florida, I was very
Hmm.
insecure to just like dress, like even wear any colors to school because I was like, I don't want that impression because I did recently come out. I think it's like it's kind of blurry right now, but it was sort of the similar feeling of like at first I was insecure, but then now that I have a platform and it's like I know that there is pressure to talk about it because these like you have a voice, you should use it, especially for like your own people. Like these are your siblings, your friends, who are going through the same thing. I didn't really go through that insecurity. It was more of like anger instead, like a lot of
Yes.
anger towards other creators that I know of who, didn't bother speaking about it or like didn't raise as much awareness as I expected.
That's so I felt that, Frederic. Yes, I very much resonated with that. And I wanted to go in talking about that because I feel like in like API culture, there's always a heavy emphasis on like keeping your head down or like assimilating, like focus on like, the American dream. Like, do
Hmm.
you have any strategies or ideas to approach this barrier, address these challenges? Like, I know you mentioned other creators not using their platform, not talking about it. So I just want to ask, like, how do you or how can we start conversations about anti-Asian hate with our family members and the people in our community?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there is that stigma of like to be more docile and I guess like reserved about these topics because if you are outspoken and controversial, the thing is like they look down upon you. I remember my
Yeah.
parents told me like just do well in school, don't cause too much drama, like behave. The whole emphasis is on like achieving your goals instead of trying to jeopardize it. So um I've always been someone who's outspoken to my parents. They call me out for like I love debating them on everything. I debate them on Black Lives Matter all the time and have successfully changed their minds about it. So I'm very happy. But when it came to the Asian hate, they mainly just had like sympathy and worry for me. They were just because they knew I was in New York City, which was also a hotspot at the time. And they were
Yes.
just like, are you okay? Like, be safe, bring like the pepper spray at all times, like always be out with your friends. And when I came home to them, I just like I would do the same thing. I was like, I know y'all are working in grocery stores, and it's like this is New Jersey. It's not like the most democratic place of the world. There's still
Yes.
stigmas against it because I'm sure like we've all experienced those microaggressions towards our family members, especially when they don't speak English perfectly. Which is there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like most people don't associate that with a good thing. So
Yes.
um, I'm more combative when I see that like just that those aggressions towards Asian peoples. And I've always said, in order to change people's minds, especially like older people, like our parents or grandparents, people who immigrated from Asia, who don't understand like American culture as much, it is important to make them realize like this is my future that I'm talking about. Instead of like I'm looking out for you, but it's also like you need to understand this is what it's going to be like for us if we don't change it. So I wouldn't say it's called pressuring your parents, but it's almost like raising awareness for them that like this is my child, I should care about as well.
Yes, I agree. I feel like it was the same for me when I was talking with my parents when all this started going on. I feel like it really shook the world. So, just sitting down, having that talk, like sprouting that in their mind, like, planting the seed, like we need to start having these conversations. Like this isn't like before where we have to keep our heads down. Like for me too, I resonated with what you said. Like when your parents are like, oh, just focus on school. That was me too. My parents were like, don't cause any problems. Like if you're just nice to everyone, like take it in a stride. Like no one's gonna like be mean to you if you're nice to them. And I was like, no, like that's not the case sometimes. Like so, yeah, like again, like here at where I work at Boss, like our goal is to challenge like the cultural norms in AAPI communities by staying silent about our social and cultural issues and our struggles. But like I feel like that's still very much prevalent, like we said, especially you live in New York, like the hot spot. I hear it, like we see it on the news, we see it everywhere. Like, how do you feel like seeing that? Like how do you go about like talking about it? Like just, voicing it to your platform. Do you like ever see people in your comment section talking about it?
Well, I've made like a few videos talking about like the movement Stop Asian Hate and just like what it
Mm,
means to just like the misrepresentation of Asian people in general and the stereotypes that are put onto us. I love talking about it all the time. And it comes in like different forms on my videos. But when I made that dedicated video, all I saw in the comments were like the same stories of them dealing like an open conversation of what they had to deal with, what they saw from their peers, people who weren't Asian, I mean. And like for me, it is a bubble because like my audience, obviously they watch me. I'm assuming they're not racist, or at least like understand my struggles as like when I talk about Asian struggles, they are like sympathetic about it. So they're very understanding of it. As for like outside, like I always see on like it's a danger to go on TikTok nowadays. I try not to, but instantly when you start thinking of like Asian fishing, or like the idea of the model minority myth, people will love to debate back and forth about it. And the truth is like it is not, when they don't listen to Asian voices, there's nothing you can do about it, especially through a digital platform. Like I think in-person speaking is the best way. I've always had a tip: if someone is arguing with you online, don't bother. Like they're not going to change their
yeah.
mind. You can't get through them. It's not worth your time to anger yourself and like go through that stress.
Yes. I feel like being like a content creator, obviously like we hope that the people that watch you, the people that are supporting you in the sense. But I feel like with when your life is out there on like the digital platform, there's always going to be like the roaches out of the cracks, like the haters. Like how do you deal with these opposing opinions? Like, and do you get hate comments a lot? Like how do you deal with it?
Well, I think like everyone always gets hate comments. I've grown numb to it because I don't really see it as much. I tend to like only look at the comments within the first day or so. If it gets
Yeah.
recommended to like a larger audience, then surely that's going to happen. And I've learned to like, I understand like how to speak to my audience to the point where it's like I can say anything, and as long as I'm well spoken about it or not misinformed, they will understand it. And if not, they will politely tell me like recorrect this, like it's this phrase instead, or hey, this is a culture that you didn't know about, or like those nuances.
Mhm.
It's only when I go on, when like my videos start to reach a different audience that is another demographic where more pushback is granted. Like I remember my Black Lives Matter was on trending, and it was just like at first it was uh like 99% positive likes, and then it just dropped down to like 95 instantly and 90 the next
Whoa.
day, just because when it reaches trending, you're reaching both sides of like the
Mm.
political parties, you're reaching literally everyone that you can imagine.
Yeah. You mentioned the model minority myth, and I feel like with your videos, like it's reaching when it goes trending, it reaches obviously different sides of the spectrum. It reaches often closed ears, often open ears, and we never know who it reaches. So, in what ways and how do you think we should go about deconstructing this model minority myth when it reaches closed ears? Does that make sense?
Yeah, personally, I find that in like once again, in-person teaching, like education is the biggest
Mm-hmm.
um stake here, because I don't want to call someone stupid for not understanding the minority myth. I'd rather say like uneducated or misinformed, because they literally don't learn that in history books. Like I didn't learn
Mm-hmm.
that through school. I had to find out through literally the internet, which I think is a great place, but also like very dangerous if you want to go down a biased route. So when you have those friends in your group who maybe don't understand as much, I think it's like almost necessary to educate them, just because that is the beginning of like being able to educate a future generation. Um, because the whole reason like we're still uneducated to this day is because from what our parents taught us and what history books taught us, because they're also like very controversial. Like they leave
There.
out stuff they want to,
Yes.
depending on where you live. Um, that is where it starts, like when you're growing up. So there's no point in like doing it online when someone's already made up their mind watching the video. Like they go into the video closed-minded. There's nothing you can do to get to them.
Yes, I feel like growing up, like I had the same experience. Like, growing up in California, I feel like I would say half Hispanic, half predominant Vietnamese. So I got pretty lucky there. But still, in the high school I went to, the textbooks, they're always biased. It's like the same biased notion, like the hiding of AAPI grief. Like they don't talk about the struggles we go to. They don't take account like these disparities. And I feel like in what ways can we like make the invisibility of our grief like visible? Because I feel like that's not something we talk about. Like we hear it from our parents and we get their story, but it's also like still notions being left out. But then we see it in when we go to school, it's like a different story where like our grief is like invisible, it's hidden. And in what ways can we start changing that? Because I feel like most information like the youth get, anyone gets, is online. And like you said, online often is a very toxic place. There's a lot of misinformation, biases. And so with that, like how do we make our grief visible?
Yeah, I mean, it's like to touch on the history books as well. It's like try to go back and imagine or remember in high school and middle school what you learned about Asia and Asian culture in general. They don't, for me at least personally, I will just say in South Carolina, they don't teach you anything about the traditional clothing they wear, the history of like the wars, the revolutions that happened, the different dynasties. And even like in modern day, like it is nice to know role models who help pave the way, especially like Asian American people who either fought for civil rights as well, because they do exist. They're just erased from history, especially like Black Americans as well. That's another thing. Any like minority is just washed off when it comes to a history book, I feel like. And if we're not able to implement, like, I guess, how do I say this? If we're not able to normalize teaching different cultures in an American society, that like that leads to the pushback to different cultures. Like the reason why there is still so much racism and colorism today is because it was never taught to us in the beginning, and we were raised without that knowledge.
No, I definitely agree. I feel like a lot of strides are like being made right now. I see a lot of progress, but I feel like there just needs to be a lot more. And obviously it's like a lot, it's just a big like one small step to a very long road. Like for my high school, they recently just like made ethnic studies a requirement to graduate. And I feel like that's just one of the many steps, but I feel like it should be about rewriting also the US history requirement,
Definitely.
what's being taught in that curriculum instead. And I feel like there also should be like things about mobilizing other community members, not just our own. And I feel like you already started it with like documenting on the Black Lives Matter protest, like talking about other POC as well. And in what ways, how do you think like we and how do you think you practice allyship with other minority communities?
It's always to show respect, and the most important part is to show that you are an ally for them. I mean, I don't want to like I'm just gonna say like there is a lot of anti-blackness within the Asian community,
Yes.
especially from like from immigrants in general, especially our parents, like older generations, just because I mean like darker skinned people aren't as common in Asia, and if they are, they're looked down upon. Like us, there's like a lot of deep colorism in there as well, which I don't want to touch on yet because that's another topic. But either way, like because they're misinformed about that, those teachings can be taught to our own like fellow peers, because I've seen it like in Philadelphia, there's still so much racism within Asian and Black groups just because of like how they were raised. So having that pushback, like when I hear sometimes where it's like an Asian person will say, well, Black people weren't nice to me growing up. Why should I be nice to them? And it's like, that is
Yeah.
not, you don't get to pick and choose when to be nice to a group. It's like, just because you have one bad experience does not justify like the other population and having resentment for them just because of their skin color. Like I've had to, like from my parents, like they would say a phrase in Chinese that was like that would describe Black people, and I always felt like it was a weird tone that they use, and I called them out. I was like, what, why do you use that tone? You don't do
Mm-hmm.
that with when you say white people instead. And I just had to like what's the word, like get rid of that from my mind, because like
Yeah.
I needed to re-educate myself basically and realign my values separate from theirs.
No, yes, I feel like it's hard when you grow up with like immigrant parents and then they pass down their thoughts to you. And when you grow up, it's often all you know. Like you grow
Mhm.
up and you have their like ideas, you have their values, and you step out into the real world. You actually like learn, and then we're often on in like I know my parents probably cannot work their way around a phone. And often the news they're watching, like I remember around the time of the protests, there were these Vietnamese like channels who were very much misinforming them about what was going on,
Mhm.
like with the riots and everything. And I was like, no, that's completely different. And often it's very hard to rewire certain brains. And that's like
Yeah.
in my case with my parents, it was hard to like, reteach them and like help them unlearn certain things. And
Yeah,
I feel like,
my parents only focused on the riot and the aggression instead of like
yeah,
the meaning behind it and the purpose of like why do you feel like they were driven to do that? What about society made them like drove them to that point? So
yeah,
it's
it was.
about educating that history.
Yes, it's just like exactly what you said. It's re-educating them, like helping them unlearn certain things that they just have like ingrained into their mind. Like
Mhm.
rather than seeing like the great meanings behind these protests, they just saw the riots and like the protests and they're like, "Oh, like this is not how it's supposed to be done." I'm like, "No, like when you cannot be heard, like something has to be done." And I feel like moving forward, like what strategies and approaches do you suggest that like like everyone in the world could do, like our community members, others that could include other racial and ethnic groups and policymakers to address anti-Asian hate and discrimination?
Oh, that's a big question. I'm gonna start at the
Yeah.
beginning. So, in terms of like educating your peers, family, friends, first you have to educate yourself because like I can only speak so much of what I know. And at first, when I heard about like anti-blackness and anti-Asianness between the communities, I was like, no way, like it's that bad. So I had to go. I just spent a day like researching, has there been Asian and Black solidarity? Yes, like it always exists, but they will never want to like people don't want to admit it and then like write that in because it feels like a minor issue to history books, I guess. But there's been many cases like you've seen Asian Americans in solidarity with Black Americans during the civil rights movement. But they like it's important to find that and see images of it and know that like that has happened before. And just because there have been events that warp your mind doesn't mean like you can't change history moving forward. And as for policymakers, like I know recently, I'm not sure which state it is, it might be California, they said that they would start putting Asian American like curriculum into, or at least like Asian culture curriculum
Yes.
into the history books. And I was like, that is where it begins, being able to see
Yes.
other cultures and see it as like another thing instead of something exotic or, different. Having
Yes.
that representation helps everyone, not just like for Asian people being able to see ourselves, but for other people to see us as
Yes,
equals.
I totally agree. I feel like like it's in the education like we talked about. I feel like it's about changing certain curriculums because I feel like in US history classes, it's always the notion of Asians as the professional foreigner. Like we often see the model minority myth is being like like really pushed on, really like highlighted, but it doesn't account like the disparities like we talked about, like making like our like the specific cultures separated, like also separated and celebrated in each to each their own instead
Mhm.
of like all grouped in one that we're often put under this big like umbrella. So I'm glad that you like really mentioned that, which I want to like get into like the next question, which is like when you off have you ever like met another like creator who had like opposing views as you? Like how did you go about that? Like I feel
I
like
don't,
with content creation you have to work with others.
I'm going to say no, I haven't met someone because I just don't reach out to people. My group of creator friends is very select, and I I've had a good like read of people based on the content they produce online. I can instantly tell whether or not we're going to vibe or not. So it's like I won't bother trying to be their friend if we happen to be in the same area because most of them are
Mhm.
in LA, anyways. Like New York City creators, like there's barely any of them apparently. And I
What?
think I have I like a group of like five people that I regularly talk to. But even with creators who aren't Asian and didn't speak about it, like I would just reach out and be like, hey, do you mind sharing this post on Instagram? Do you mind like telling your viewers this story or like just bringing awareness to this movement? They've always said yes. Like,
Oh,
and
that's
then
beautiful.
5 minutes later, I see the post on their stories. It's like not hard at all. Um, but I will say like that doesn't just because like I've never experienced it like doesn't mean it doesn't exist because
Mhm.
it's definitely happening. They just are scared to speak up about it because that could just cause drama.
No, I agree. I feel like a lot of like the movement building and a lot of the work is done like beyond social media. Like it's more than like what you said, like posting about it. I feel like we need to have facilitations of that conversation rather than like simple reposts and stuff. So how do you say how could we go about like bringing the movement past the social media? Like I feel like often it ends there sometimes for like
Mhm.
especially for AAPI like bringing awareness to the AAPI hate with everything going on. I feel like it often is a movement online and we never really see it off
It is a
like
hashtag and it ends there. Yeah.
it's yes.
Or yellow square for some people.
Yes, the yellow square is what I mean. Yes,
um,
yes.
I mean, like, if you're as passionate about it, I think the first thing is to say, like, what motivates you to continue this past social media? If you don't honestly feel motivated by it, I would just ask yourself, like, why is that? Is it something with like the in-person feeling or like the idea of having to put an effort? Because true change doesn't come from like I don't think it can just come from social media anymore because like it's always been through protests, through knocking on doors, calling politicians, like being at the the epicenter of where change happens because the way our government works, like it's with the people of power. So being able
Yes.
to reach them, to contact them, even calling senators, it can even start like within your own high school. I think people underestimate the power that students have when they group together because like for example, we used to not have free Adobe access at one of my high schools, and eventually enough of us petitioned enough to get it. So it's like those little things, like having
Yeah.
gender neutral bathrooms, going for that, like raising awareness by making Asian American clubs. If that isn't there, if you're in a rural town, make one, be the one who
Yes.
starts that. Go up to your principals and your teachers and say, like, can you talk about this? History teachers, can you mention this? But the important part is like, you have to know what to mention because if you're not even aware of it, they're not going to care. So I think it's putting a lot of pressure for like high schoolers and college students to have to know everything in order to educate the older generation. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, that is how the world works. It's like the younger people, at least Gen Z, is more outspoken than ever before. So I
Yes.
think we should continue that stereotype and be
No,
outspoken.
yes. No, yes. Again, like you said, like it often relies on like the youth nowadays. I feel like because we do have access to a lot of technology nowadays, like, and I feel like technology is a very, very strong like tool in like our fight and like just our movement, like and activism in a sense. But we know like with older generations, I feel like this access to technology, while maybe they do, maybe they don't, how do we get it beyond like taking it on the social media, like we said, the technology, because I feel like there's often people who do not also have access to technology. Like, how do we reach them? And like with older generations, I feel like it's about learning how to like maneuver technology and using it. So, how do you think we could get it to them?
Well, it depends on your personal preference. Like some
Yeah,
people prioritize social media if you want to say like I want to educate millennials and younger because
yeah,
they're the ones on their phones. If you want to go the in-person route, that is like older generations and doing the phone call thing. But I don't think we should underestimate social media as a tool for education because while TikTok can be very misinformed, if you know
yes,
your information is on the right side of history, I would say utilize it because that is just wasted information. It is so easy to make content nowadays in
yes,
like in TikTok because it's so accessible and also like fast paced. I mean, how many times have you scrolled through something and been like, "Oh, it's nice to know that. Now I know that forever," or
yes,
I didn't learn that before. I subscribe to so many people who just do like it can be easy as like fashion history, learning about like I subscribe to things as like learning Asian American characters and that stuff like or sorry, Chinese characters. I'm losing
yeah.
my train of thought. But like little 15-second to 60-second clips of small things can help you, you know, learn more about both your culture and it can spread to other people who didn't know it because the For You page lets you see almost everyone at some point. So
Yes. Yes, it does. I again, like I said about the like when we talked about TikTok, I feel like you see like so much like videos about educating others, and again, like it's the voice of Gen Z. Like they're more outspoken than ever. I feel like we really are like utilizing what we have, and
mhm.
it's like a great thing to see. I feel like change we're really in like the generation of change. But thank you, Frederick, for sitting down and talking with me. Is there
Of
anything
course.
else you want to add or anything for
Yeah, I
everyone
just
watching right
remembered. Another important part of social media is to prioritize who you support because if the top numbers are always, dominated by white creators and people who are no shade, only doing dance moves, I would say like if you only want to subscribe to that, go on ahead. Like I'm totally for that. But if you want to see yourself represented, it is actively searching for Asian American creators, Chinese characters, or no, sorry, Chinese like Chinese creators, Indian creators, Cambodian, like finding your own culture in order to feel represented and know that just because I'm subscribing to them, that will possibly help someone else see them on the feed because we don't grow without other people's support. We can make the best content and be on the same level of professionalism and creativity as another creator, but based on skin color and like that can totally change how we're pushed because it is biased. The algorithm always like feeds you what you watch and what you already look at.
Yes, that was very well worded. Thank you, Frederick. I thank you on behalf of everyone watching. We will be using this interview in our showcase where everyone will see it will be edited, of course. And then a staff member will reach out to you in regards to compensation and everything else. I will send you a follow-up email. But thank you for sitting down with me. I learned a lot, and I definitely will continue watching your videos and
Thank
all your New
you.
York vlogs
Yeah,
because
that
I will
last thing
live.
was just an excuse for you to say subscribe to my channel.
Yeah, subscribe to Frederick's channel, everyone watching, and I will be watching your New York vlog so I could live vicariously through you. One day I'll be in the same city as you,
Of
hopefully.
course, come to New York City as best city in the world.
All right, thank you so much, Frederick. I think that concludes our interview.